Hello, hi. So I am back to talk about episode 5 of The Magician. So we are, funnily enough, I was watching the episode and it like slid right into episode 6 as Netflix is wont to do. And I was about to lean in. I was about to watch it because I was very interested in what was going to happen next and I had to stop it because I wanted to do this recap. So this is what I noticed and saw about episode 5 of The Magicians. So I was doing my notes, just kind of thinking about what the theme of this episode is. And what I realized was that there was no general, well, I won't say there was no general theme. So what I realized though while thinking of the theme was that this was that episode, which happens in every season of The Magicians, which I enjoy, especially when it happens so early in the season, because that just lets me know that there is some more story, and some of the notes that I made and things that I saw will very likely be at minimum addressed if they're not solved. So this was the part where, they have their big let's save the world moment, and they have these well laid out plan, like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then when it was time for the thing that they wanted to do, there was a huge obstacle and it did not go as planned. So that's what happened this time. And so in this episode, they found out at the end of episode 4 that from Zelda, that the way that they could prevent the convergence was by moving the moon. And so it was funny because she was just like, it's not impossible, you just have to move that, and show them the moon. And it's like, what? So they find out that it is possible to move. Well, they find out that there are a group of people that worship the moon, and they're called lunatics, which is funny. So kind of this, I appreciated the play on words. And they go to find one. She has a tattoo on her eyeball, which I suppose that could be like, that's not impossible. I don't know all about the body mod community, but a tattoo on your eyeball is aggressive. But she had a tattoo of the moon on her eyeball, but she was also in a mental health facility, like a resident of a mental health facility, which also let us know that she has had mental challenges where she needs to be in an environment where she has support all the time. And so they talk to her. She's like, you don't move the moon, you ask her to move. And so they find out that they have to do this spell, but the spell has to happen once they've achieved or acquired moon brain. But that happens after they've been awake for 5 days. Now, if you just are a fan of kind of horror and sci-fi fantasy, the idea of not being able to sleep comes up quite a bit. And that's because medically we are supposed to rest, because if not, then that causes us to have, hallucinations. You can't focus, you can't function normally, because your body, rest and rejuvenation are an important part of our processes as humans. So for them to have to stay up for 5 days straight is automatically aggressive. So we know, all right, this is the big thing that they have to do to save the world. And it's an episode where we get all of the magicians together, at least initially, which I thought was cool. I like when they're all together because it adds some very interesting dynamics, but we also get to see them kind of interact with each other based on situations that may have happened over the course of the show that don't always come up because everyone is not always in the same episode. So they are like, we got to stay awake. Now, once they come to the conclusion that they have to do that, and at least 3 of them have to make it to the 5 days, because you need 3 people to do the spell to ask the moon to move. So they're just like, all right, that means everybody needs to do this, because, people are inevitably everybody's not gonna succeed at staying awake. So of course, it goes into full on magician mode, and they are trying to stay awake and having their issues with hallucinating. And then Josh, the cook, makes them muffins with drugs in them to stay awake. And so that was the funny. And so they kind of had this whole thing. And in the midst of all of that, we seem to be focusing on Eliot and Margo, because they both have secrets. Margot's secret is that, so I think maybe that could be, as I'm talking about it, could be the theme of this episode, is when you have big secrets and you don't tell the people who need, who are closest to you and who kind of need to know about these secrets, just kind of outright. You don't just have a conversation with them. And as everyone knows, in real life, it's not always that easy to just tell secrets. But of course, in these scripted shows, it's like there's sometimes an expectation of the audience that's like, why don't you just tell them? And it's like, well, in real life, would you tell someone that you were just going to abandon them to their fate and really not going to try to, go above and beyond to save them, which is essentially Margot's secret about Josh and Finn, where she had just decided they have to stay in the past. They aren't going to be able to come to the present, and there's nothing we could do about it. And was just kind of willing to let that be. Whereas Eliot, did some things that made it so that they could come back. But with Eliot, we are seeing, something that I mentioned for, I can't remember which recap. I think the very beginning, recap for episode 1 of the season, Eliot had that God inside of him for months. And so it's just like, how did you come out of that just completely unscathed? Like, you couldn't have. And so in this episode, we start to see he did not. And his hallucinations and his kind of negative effects of sleep deprivation is he starts to see the God within him. And so I made a note, and it was just like, let me see what my note was. I say, is the God still connected to Eliot, or is he just hallucinating? And so we don't really get an answer. We do see, though, that Eliot is having these experiences, and then right at the moment that they are, they get to the moon rock and they're casting the spell, he goes off, and he has this moment where he's looking at a mirror and he sees the God as himself. But then Morena from season, I don't remember, drawing a blank, I have to look it up, and I'll look it up and then share it below, which season she kind of left or died or was kicked out. However it was, she had her separation from the group because she didn't have the best intentions and kind of didn't do things in the way that worked well with everyone else, or with Katie particularly, or Julia. I'm drawing a blank because it's been a couple of seasons since she was around. So she comes back and she has brought her people, and they come and disrupt the final spell to ask the moon to move. Then of course she comes in and interrupts, but Eliot had already left. So you have Alice and Julia are sitting there. They kind of get captured by her. Eliot has his thing that we don't see fully play out. We just see him see the God, and then we see him, the guy kind of, pauses, and then we cut to the scene with Morena and Julia and Alice and the guy, whose name I can't remember, whose name she couldn't remember in the show, having their kind of conversation. And of course, Morena wants the convergence to happen. She does not care about the people that might die. She needs it for her own personal uses, and they're kind of arguing back and forth. So of course it begins to happen, and the result of the convergence, it's not inherently an apocalyptic event. It is now because there is an uptick in magic just in the world, in the ether. So of course the convergence begins when Eliot kind of comes up to where they're having this conversation. They don't see him, and so he begins to redo the spell that, basically it amplifies magic. So they're like, great, that means Eliot can kind of do this for us. But of course Morena intervenes, and what happens is they break the moon. So not only do they not ask the moon to move appropriately, but they break the moon, and not from their own wreath. It's because Morena is trying to force them to not do the spell, so she's fighting. So I think between the push-pull with her and Eliot, it causes the moon to shatter, which means that it's still going to be an apocalypse, because now they wanted moon rock, now they have a ton of moon rock coming straight to Earth. And then that is how the episode ends. And so it's secrets, because what I see is, one, this happens every season where they kind of make their big, I'm going to save the world, and then it fails horribly and it just does not work out at all. So then they go from having a well-laid plan to kind of one big Hail Mary pass. And so that is where we're going to go for episode 6, which was what happened when I was watching it, because I was still like, what's going to happen, and didn't notice the Netflix thing where it, kind of gives you an ability to not immediately go into the next episode, missed that altogether, and was just like, let's run it. But I paused it so I could do this recap. But I think that the theme of secrets is important because, Margo and Josh are a couple. It's hard to tell because it's kind of back and forth. But I think the biggest secret and the biggest issue here is with Eliot and the God, because I can't imagine. And, Julia pulls him to the side and is like, hey, because the sister was in Julia. So she's like, the sister was in me. I remember everything. I'm feeling darkness from being sleep deprived. But of course, Julia, the sister was in Julia for like, I don't know, a few days, maybe a week. Whereas the brother was in Eliot for months, like an extended period of time. So it's like, she kind of checks in with him, but he isn't honest. And so I think that secret is going to come back up. I think that that is going to be the big thing that is going to affect the rest of the season, because we're only on episode 5 and we're dealing with the convergence, which means we have more season to go after whatever happens with the convergence happens. So hopefully they're able to stop the moon rock from destroying Earth and stopping the apocalypse. But then after that, it's still going to be a matter of Eliot coming to terms with what happened with the God, and then also figuring out if there's still a connection between the two. Because I can imagine if someone inhabits your body for several months, even when they're removed, there are remnants. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens going forward. But what I did appreciate in this episode was that Zelda was still in the mix. Zelda is very helpful in her quirky Zelda way, which I kind of enjoy. It's like super prim and proper, like with her hands and everything. It's like this. It's kind of cool. And them having kind of their side adventure with getting with the depository, but us finding out that Morena bought the depository. So we're getting kind of some dots connected as far as like what has happened with magic and with the resources from the library and kind of where everything is. And so we could be setting ourselves up to kind of see Zelda maybe taking up her mantle again as the head librarian, with us now knowing where the depository is and who owns it. So we will see. I did notice that we didn't have a lot of another thing. So there wasn't a lot happening with Penny, but he's kind of grounded. We got at the very beginning of the episode, because he doesn't have his psychic abilities. He can still travel, but now it's like he can travel anywhere. He won't be able to see or know where he's going, it's already dangerous to travel. Traveling blind like that it sounds like 100 times more dangerous. And so I'm sure, I have a feeling that because Earth is on the precipice of an apocalypse at the end of this episode, I can't imagine that whatever happens next it's probably not going to be good. And there might be a need for Penny's ability to travel, because we still haven't really reckoned with the signal that he was experiencing. Like the assumption and kind of the way that it left off will make you think that the signal was connected to the convergence, but I'm not 100% sure that's the case. It could very well be something else, and so we'll see. I'm interested to see how that particular plot point kind of branches out, or kind of that story is told. But we did see, though, before everything kind of went to hell in a handbasket on Earth, with Finn and Fillory, she met back up with, I think that was the fairy. Yeah, she was on a fairy mission, and so she met up with a fairy, and so, you know, that also I feel like will come into play somewhere. So we still have some things that need to be some stories that still need to be told, and so I'm very interested to see what's going to happen next. I'm already in it, so I'm gonna go ahead and just power through episode 6, so that I can see where we land with this apocalypse, and if it is truly apocalyptic, or if they're able to stop it, or at least make it not as devastating. So yeah, so what were your thoughts of episode 5? If you're rewatching this while I do my watch, then and you saw some details that I missed, because again, these episodes are so layered and there's so many things that are happening that I think it other opinions, I'm all open to other opinions. I did also find it interesting with Zelda and Katie's conversation about the ether realm, the other realm where Dean Fogg is still there, that you can come back from it, because after that episode it made it seem like once you were left there, you're left there forever. But the fact that Zelda actually was there for 3 years but then got out is interesting. And I have a feeling, I'm not 100%, I don't have any kind of insider knowledge, but I have a feeling, and we might find it interesting, that I have a feeling that we might get some other characters that kind of could make a reappearance, on top of Dean Fogg making a reappearance coming from that other realm. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. But those are my predictions. So what I definitely think we're going to have to reckon with Eliot and the God in that whole situation. Like that's going to play out in this season, and we're going to have some type of, can't even say resolution, but that story is going to come to a head. I think that the signal that Penny was experiencing that made his powers so erratic had nothing to do with the convergence, and it was actually something else. And I think that that's going to come back around after the apocalyptic event takes place. Now, who survives the apocalyptic event? I think we can't lose any more magicians right now. We just lost Quentin. That was terrible and hard. So I am optimistic that everyone will stay with us, but it definitely may change how people relate. And I'm optimistic, and hopefully my optimism isn't killed. So if you're watching this again, or you're taking a look at this video after you've seen the whole season 5, I guess don't spoil it for me. I'm doing this after the fact, after the season has been played out, and doing my recaps, but I'm optimistic that we're not going to lose any more magicians this season anyway. So yeah, what are your thoughts? How did you like this episode? Were you annoyed that their plans didn't work? Were you expecting it? Because that kind of is what happens. What did you think? So let's talk in the comments below, and otherwise I will be back to recap episode 6. I'm actually kind of excited to see what's going to happen there, and how this whole apocalypse thing is going to pan out. So we'll see how that goes, and I look forward to coming back to chat with you about The Magicians season 5 recap. So that's it. Stay tuned, come back. If you're not following me, if you found this, just a quick before I go, you found this and are not following me, give me a follow, join. I do recaps like this. I talk about other things related to horror and sci-fi. I'm a big fan of those, and so I would, I'm building kind of my own community of fellow horror fans here on YouTube. So join, and then click the notification so that you are aware when I upload a new video. But again, that's it. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to chatting in the comments, and I also look forward to the next time that we can talk again about The Magicians, episode 6.